Hey, Amanda.
Hi, Wendy.
How are you doing today?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm good. Trying to adjust to virtual learning, back to school kind of thing, and that, but it's working out. All right. What about you?
I'm right there with you. Hanging
All
in there.
right. We're
Yep.
so excited today that we have two very, very special guests. And these guests are exactly what we need due to the fact that most of everyone, if not all, are adjusting to this virtual learning. And today we have our special guest, Matt Burns, who, and I'll let him tell about who he is and what he's done. He's a jewel here in Houston, passionate about education, joined with his partner, Dr. Scott Van Beck, also joining us on the call today. Welcome, guys.
Thank you.
So can y'all share with our moms who you are, what you do, and what we should know about you?
Yeah. Scott, you want to start?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Matt. So Matt and I co-founded a group called the Education Game, and so we're all about helping families help their children break through to high levels of learning, whether that be in school, sort of a hybrid model, or out of school. And very quickly, my background, I worked 25 years in the Houston Independent School District. I left in 2008 as the West Region Superintendent. So I had 60 schools, about 54,000 kids on the West Side. And then I led a nonprofit called Houston A+ Challenge for 10 years. We launched a personalized learning lab school while I was there. And now I live in Montpelier, Vermont, and just glad to be part of the Education Game.
I love that.
Glad to have you a part of it, Scott. It's been really fun so far. And for me, Matt Barnes, the way I describe myself is I ask the question, have you ever noticed that parents are asking a whole new series of questions right now as a result of COVID? They're asking questions about, what does online learning look like? What do I need to do outside of school? How do I interact with the school in this new environment? I think all those are the right questions. These are questions that parents should have and really should be asking at all times. And so my background is I've been on a bunch of educational boards from university all the way down to Head Start. I have raised our own kids in almost every educational model you can imagine, from public school to hybrid school, virtual school. And then my daughter right now is, I don't even know what you call it. She's doing her own thing. She's completely self-led. And so to me, there's an element of my own experience that I feel like I would hope other kids and other families could learn about. So that's partly why we set up the Education Game. And it's also just to make sure that parents understand the options available to them and that they can develop a plan for their kids. I'm sure we'll be talking about the plan at some point today.
That's awesome. Thank you guys so much for being on again.
Yeah.
So let me go into the first question that we have. What do you think elementary, middle school education should look like in the upcoming school year? Either one of you can answer that first.
Yeah.
Matt?
Sure. I'll take a stab at it. What should elementary and middle school education look like? I'll have to switch the two because there's differences, of course. I'll start with the middle school. I would hope that right now when we're doing this virtual learning that one of the major priorities would be to help the child learn how to learn on their own, to be an independent learner. If you think about it, this is the first time probably in most kids' educational career that they have some freedom to actually develop things that they're interested in, as opposed to every day having a fairly rigid schedule of here's what you're going to learn about, here's when it's due, here's how you're going to complete it. And really the future of our world is not those types of rigid answers and rigid processes, but a much more flexible space where a child can go deep on the areas that they're interested in. So for the middle school student and for the elementary school student, I would hope that there'd be a lot more opportunity for the kid to explore the things that are interesting to them, and that there is a plan around how to learn through those areas of interest.
That's good.
That's great.
Anything to add to that, Scott? That is great.
No, I think Matt covered that pretty well.
Okay. And what changes are possible that we should be making or could be making in the elementary, middle school education that's ideal due to the fact that we have the impacts of COVID?
Yeah, I think this gives schools an awesome opportunity to move in the direction of skill building, especially in middle schools. We see a lot of skill building in our early elementary, such as teaching kids how to read and write and problem solve. But right around the 5th grade, what happens in the American curriculum is that skill building kind of stops, and content comes into the curriculum. And so if we could have some more skill building, and we're not going to forget about the content, but we're going to drive the content through the reading, writing, and problem solving skills. I think that schools could probably produce greater self-directed learners than what they've been doing in the past.
You know, Scott, if I could jump in, why don't you tell them a little bit about some of what you learned from the middle school work you've done in the past, particularly in the school startup that y'all did?
Yeah, so in a previous organization in Houston, we launched a personalized learning lab school. We took 50 kids age 11 through 13. And the promise that we made to the parents was that they would see a year and a half worth of growth in their children, in their reading, writing, and problem solving skills over every year that they were with us. And out of those 50 kids, at least 46, possibly 47 showed 4.5 years of growth over 3 years. And the reason, it's no magic secret how we did that. We did that by first emphasizing skill building, and then use content within the building of those skills. And so oftentimes, Wendy and Amanda, what we see in schools is kids don't get nearly enough time to work on their reading skills, on their writing skills. They're busy learning content. And again, content is important, but I think it's only important as it serves to build those very, very important skills. And let's don't forget about character skills also.
Can you give us an example of some of the curriculum or some of the assignments that the kids would do in that course?
Yeah, so there was a gal named JC, and she was interested in fashion design, and she was 12 years old, and she wasn't very interested in anything other than fashion design. And so the learning coach, we didn't call them teachers, we called them learning coaches, let JC sort of explore fashion design for, I think it was like 4 or 5 weeks. And then the learning coach set JC down and said, you know, I'm really impressed with your work around fashion design. But JC, you know, if you don't become a better reader and a better writer and a better problem solver, you know, there's probably not a lot of future for you in the fashion design industry. And it was at that moment that JC decided that she was going to negotiate some of her learning time. And I dare say that wouldn't have happened if JC would not have been allowed to explore and sort of get her passion underneath her belt before the adult learning leader started to negotiate around her deficits. Oftentimes in schools, what we do is we concentrate and almost accentuate the deficits instead of taking a look at the learner's assets.
Absolutely. So she really got to see the possibility of herself and her future as a fashion designer, and then was able to look at her weaknesses and kind of build.
And I would say, Amanda, you know, every kid has that passion. And,
yes.
You know, oftentimes when a kid will share their passion, a bunch of adults will roll their eyes and say, you know, this is a waste of time.
Yeah.
Well,
ridiculous.
to the learner, it's not a waste of time. This is really where learning negotiations start, if you will.
Yeah, Scott, and I like how you guys took what she loved and connected to learning, which fueled her fire to live out and to seek out her passion. That's awesome. And what it does as a result of it, she became an independent and engaged learner because she was passionate about it and she was able to see that. So that's awesome. That's really awesome. So what are some recommendations that with this upcoming school year, virtual learning, some hybrid learning, how should families or parents be planning for this upcoming school year? What are the things that they should be doing? Because a lot of what we hear about our parents is that they're overwhelmed, they have to work and balance their kid. And I don't know if you guys have seen what the virtual learning is consist of and what it involves, but I would say for the last 2 weeks, I have been assisting 8 first graders through virtual learning from 7:30 until 3 o'clock. And I can tell you, it was intense and it was exhausting. And those kids probably around 9:30, they were tired. I was a teacher.
I'll just ask the question. So how should parents be planning for the coming school year? And a lot of us are, nervous about it. There's a lot of stress. Parents are going back to school. It's a lot to juggle.
Yeah, it is. It's a real challenge, but planning is what Scott and I really focus on, because without a plan, you're just dead in the water and you get anxious, and the children, of course, feel that. So what we would argue is, when you're planning for the upcoming school year, you got to be really clear first on what is it that you want your child, and who do you want your child to become. Scott mentioned character a moment ago, and that should factor in my view, centrally into kind of where you want your child to be and what you want them to become. But that requires a real clear plan. Now, once the plan is developed, then the parent has to do something else, which is very uncomfortable for a lot of parents, and that is negotiate. And negotiate almost like an equal, in a way that most parents have hesitated to do historically, because when you negotiate with the school, you're kind of negotiating with a 10,000-pound gorilla. But in this environment, parents have unique needs, unique demands, and without being clear to the teacher, hey, here's my situation, here's what I can do, teacher, how can we work something out? That creates all sorts of potential problems downstream. So one of the parents that we work with a bunch when we're talking about this idea of negotiation. One had 2 kids, both in elementary school. She spoke English and Spanish, but her mother was going to be taking care of her child during the day. Her mother only speaks Spanish. And so I was encouraging, and Scott and I were encouraging this mother to say to her teacher, here's my situation. Here's the structure that I have. And here is what we are going to do to make sure our kids are reading every day. But it's not necessarily going to be at 10 o'clock, right? Because grandmother is there. It might be at 6 p.m. And it's definitely going to be at 11 o'clock a.m. on Saturday and 2 o'clock p.m. on Sunday, right? They're going to make sure their kid gets done, but the negotiation with the teacher is the conversation that a lot of parents struggle with. But it has to happen. The child is in the parent's care and custody. For the teacher not to know what's going on within the family's life means the teacher is completely powerless to negotiate a workable solution. And lastly on this is, we encourage parents to, when they're talking to the teacher, negotiating, to ask the teacher to narrow the curriculum to the essentials. Right? We can't, parent we talked to a couple days ago, their child is supposed to be on the computer or near the computer for about 6 hours every day. That does not make sense. So negotiate with the teacher around what is the minimum that we can do and still be successful. So I want to make sure I can adhere to that. But going beyond that, teacher, we've got problems because of my work schedule, because I got multiple kids, whatever. Usually teachers are very open to negotiating that.
So I'll just do the follow-up. So a lot of conversation, Matt and Scott, is about the pods. A lot of families are saying, we're looking for a place where our kids can get support from educators, college students nowadays, high school students, people are doing. What are your thoughts about the learning pods and the impacts of that? Pros, cons, good, bad, ugly?
What do you think, Scott? You want to take it or want me to?
Oh, I'll take a stab at it.
All right.
I think learning pods are good if it benefits the learner and the family, and they're bad if they don't. I think a couple of ways you can make learning pods better is if you have a strong learning plan for each learner, and then compare those learning plans and see what commonalities and what differences there might be, because that's how you're probably going to either congregate the pod or split the pod up. One caution that I would give parents is that if you are going to explore learning pods, I think it's a good idea to find someone with some expertise. Some parents might be able to do this, but one of the things that you don't want to happen is a group of learners come together and there is no learning. It's just kind of collaboration light, if you will. Everything should be, for a purpose, and that purpose, I think, goes right back to that learning plan.
Yeah. If I could add to that, I think with a couple things. As a former homeschooler, learning pods are nothing new. This is not a new dynamic. Anytime a number of adults get together to strategize about how to help their children succeed, that's a learning pod. When people come to our webinars, that is a learning pod. So I want to demystify some elements of it. At the same time, to Scott's point, parents who are now creating this learning pod, they really need to be thinking about how to establish themselves as a credible educator, right? So that means they need to be learning. They need to be developing a learning plan for themselves as well as for their kids, so that they can make sure that their kids, to Scott's point, are building the skills and not just having a good time, right? There's got to be some surround. So a learning plan for the child and a learning plan for the parent, to me, is part of the essential element in setting up learning pods.
Can you tell that we're really big on learning plans?
I'd love to hear.
And I'll tell you why. There are too many parents, no matter what their socioeconomic status is, that their learning plan has been in the past, I'm going to get my kid ready for this place called school and send them there, and then wait until they come home. As I told many parents, I can give you my best professional advice as an educator, but make no mistake about this. No one knows that child better than you do as the parent. And so I stand beside you as a parent, as an educator, to help. But this whole cause, this whole movement has to be, in my view, about ownership of the parent and the family toward what the plan is going to be for the child's learning. Schools can help with that. Schools can help big time with that. But also, let's don't forget about out-of-school learning and how important that is to every child.
Preach, Scott. Preach. We're big on this.
And what is out-of-school learning? What would you consider that to be?
Well, I think out-of-school learning is anything that doesn't happen in school.
Okay.
So think about what happens with, little babies up until the time they start pre-K. Think about after-school programs. Think about choir. Think about youth football that's not connected with a school. Arguably, there is as much out-of-school learning going on, or should be going on, in a child's life than what's happening inside of these places called schools.
And let me add one piece, we have time for this? Okay, so adding to that, Scott,
yes.
The other day we're talking with another family, and part of their learning plan was their child being able to communicate and become a better communicator. And so the things that child was interested in were related to science. And so each 2 weeks, that child is going to be presenting on Zoom to 4 or 5 of her family, friends, maybe an expert here or there, about what she learned on a subject has nothing to do with school, right? So that is learning outside of school. That's becoming an independent learner, regardless of what school is doing. And that's something the child's excited about, the parent's excited about, the grandparent who's going to be on the Zoom call. This is a whole different universe that we're operating in. We have to let go of the idea that school is the place where learning takes place.
Did y'all get that?
We did. I'll just repeat the question.
What is 21st century learning? And how can you, okay.
Yeah, how can you support it with virtual learning? So there's a ton of materials online around 21st century learning or 21st century education. Just Google that, you'll get 10 million hits. what it is saying is that in the future, there's going to be much more need for comfort and ambiguity, a recognition that we are entering a society where things are just volatile, right? Technology is just disrupting everything on a breakneck pace. And so if kids grow up believing that there's one right answer, and that answer is oftentimes on a multiple choice presentation, that kid's growing up into a world that is going to largely grind them up because the rules will completely shift. So when we were just talking about virtual learning and using technology to present to, family members or experts around a topic that you have interest in, that is something that is a 21st century skill. I am individually interested in, one of the parents told me that her daughter said that she's interested in what's under her skin, right? So that child in 2 weeks should be describing what's under her skin to a few friends, hopefully someone who's a nurse or a doctor or physical therapist, someone in the medical community, to describe what she is learning. That is 21st century learning. It's directed by the child largely. It is deepening their own knowledge of areas of interest, and it is helping them share to the community. That's one of a number of different ways to talk about 21st century learning. Of course, Scott has a whole lot more experience in some of this than I do. So.
Yeah, Wendy and Amanda, I don't know if I understand the term 21st century learning because the fact is the little ones that are just starting kindergarten, they're actually going to be 22nd century learners. I think good learning is good learning, whether it whatever century it happens in. But I will say that in the American curriculum, at least, a big shift needs to happen. And that is, we need to get out of the content business, asking kids to memorize and regurgitate. We have devices that can probably find out information for ourselves faster than any time in human history. The shift has to happen from content to the building of skills. That's what most kids don't have. When I used to give diplomas out as a high school principal, there were many, many kids that so-called passed the test in order to graduate, but they could not read, they could not write, they could not problem solve, and they did not understand the importance of character. So for me, when you talk about 21st century, you talk clearly about those 4 skills and the attainment of those skills.
What either one can take this. What can we do to help kids who've been extremely lonely? Particularly a kid that's they don't have any siblings, they're by themselves. They could be an extrovert child, who haven't had access to their friends during COVID. Like, what recommendations would you do to help those kids?
Okay, we'll be a little bit of a broken record here, but the first part is there's got to be a plan developed, and that plan would take into account the reality of that child's emotional circumstance and social circumstance. So when we talk about a learning plan, we're not talking about a school plan or an academic plan. We're talking about a learning plan that includes these things that Scott talks about: character, reading, problem solving, social elements. It takes into account the realities of the family. So if there is a child that has that circumstance, there's got to be a plan that's developed, and that plan is personalized to the circumstance of that family, and then it's executed. That is how we would recommend every parent think about this strategically, almost like a head coach would approach their own sports club, very strategically about what they're trying to accomplish.
Thank you so much for that response. That was eloquently said. So thank you so much for that, Matt. We've come to the end of the show, but what are ways that our families could view some of your webinars, hear some of your podcasts, some of your information? Where would they need to go to get that information?
Yeah, well, everything is at our website, theeducationgame.com. We do webinars pretty much every other week, Scott, right? Podcasts are coming out weekly now. That's the best way to connect with us. we also have some Facebook discussions as well. But go to our website, theeducationgame.com. There's also an opportunity for families to schedule a one-on-one with Scott or I to just talk about their situation. It's a 20 or 30-minute conversation. We can start helping people think about how to build a bit of a plan, completely free service, just as a service community. So that's found on our website as well.
Thank you so much, Matt and Scott, for joining us today. This has been great. And thank you, listeners who have been watching. Follow us on Coffee Talk Moms. Share, like, comment. Tell us what you want to hear, what you don't want to hear. But thanks for watching. Bye for now.
I'm right there with you. Hanging in
All right.
there.
I kind of overdid that, guys. We haven't done this in a while, but we'll cut that out. We're so excited.